So I was recently invited by a collection of very impressive procurement leaders in America to present to them and their networking group that look at procurement innovations. And they asked me to speak on the subject of digital procurement in 2024, and specifically where are we on skills, workforce, and hiring. So here's a presentation I made, which I hope you find very interesting. So we started with a question. We asked, how well equipped are you to succeed in a future where procurement is entirely digital? And we got a number of answers, which we'll come to shortly. Whilst we're doing that, I asked the audience to put in their percentage estimate of their capability to embrace the era of digital procurement. And whilst I did that, I made an introduction. I explained that I'm a specialist recruiter in the world of digital procurement and supply chain. I get to work with software vendors, consultancies, and end users across the digital procurement ecosystem throughout Europe and North America. And I explained that that gives me a great opportunity to talk to so many talented people with different perspectives about where we are on technology, where we are in the use of tech systems, where we are on skills, adoption, implementation, etc. And I also get to go, of course, to many conferences such as Digital Procurement World last year, or that picture there shows me presenting at Jaguar Rev in Barcelona the month after in November, and explain how that gives me a great opportunity to learn from thought leaders, both within the procurement world and from outside. So, for example, you've got people at DPW like David Rogers from Columbia Business School, who's a specialist in digital transformation, Yossi Sheffi, who's a professional of engineering systems at MIT, and we can learn a great deal from those people from outside of our sector. So, back in 2018, when I was first asked to speak on the subject of digital skills, I made a presentation called Climbing the Career Ladder in an Automated World. And at that point in time, I discovered a quote from A.T. Kearney, which said that procurement faces a wake-up call as tectonic shifts in technology threaten to completely alter the function, leading eventually to its automation. And here we are in January of 2024. And I would argue that last year was the year when Gen AI really became a big thing in the world of business software. Of course, we still started to use ChatGPT, and in the world of procurement, there were a number of examples of where Gen AI was really enhancing what procurement tech could do for procurement and supply chain practitioners. So I would argue we're on the cusp of the era where A.T. Kearney may well be proved correct. So how confident was my audience feeling in the States? Well, actually, the answers that I got were typically around the sort of 30 to 60% estimates. So some people a little bit nervous about committing, others feeling a bit more bullish, but ultimately no one saying they were truly ready for the era of digital procurement. So first question we asked, or rather the next question we asked, I should say, is are digital procurement skills a priority for CPOs? And I produced some data to share with my audience. And this is what we looked at. I said that back in 2018, when I first started to research this topic, a report by Deloitte, where they surveyed various CPOs internationally, told us that 75% of CPOs felt their teams had little or no digital capability to thrive in an era of digital procurement. So at that stage, we weren't in great shape. Moving forward to 2020-22, a report by EY told us that CPOs were still prioritizing traditional skills, and there was that 82% figure there is made up of three traditional skills, if you will. The first one being core procurement, one being stakeholder engagement, and the third one being supplier or category market expertise. And that really got me thinking when I read that at the time. It reminded me of the very first brief that I'd been given to recruit for a purchasing manager by a head of purchasing, which gives you an idea as to how long ago it was, given the language. And they asked me to focus on those same three skills. That was back in 1998. 24 years later, the procurement is still prioritizing, the procurement professional rather, is still prioritizing the same skills. I'm slightly concerned about that. So, moving forward, another report by Deloitte last year said that 62% of CPOs were prioritizing training for core skills, those same sorts of skills, core skills, with their training budgets last year. Second was data analytics, and that's quite interesting because they highlighted this data analytics as being the biggest skills gap. So 42% of CPO said that's a skills gap. So they'd already started to address that by making it the second priority into the training and development. But digital skills came in at a lowly 9th. So on balance, I would argue that data suggests that really CPOs are not prioritizing digital skills just yet. So what are those key digital procurement skills? Well, for the purpose of this discussion, I'm focusing on 4 core areas that I think are really important and that I hear from elite procurement functions and their leaders that they're really focusing on. And the first one is digital literacy. That's about being comfortable and competent in navigating the digital world in general. And that's something we use in our business lives, in the modern workplace, but also in our personal lives and wider society. So that's something which really we should be accumulating as individuals. I then talk about technological proficiency, and that's more about the ability to effectively use technologies that are relevant to a specific job or task. And they require deep understanding and skill in using a particular tool or platform, software system, call it what you will. So that's a more deeper knowledge that the best people are starting to really develop. And examples of that, of course, are advanced data analysis. I don't think any procurement practitioner needs me to tell them the importance now of data, not only in procurement, but in other disciplines, of course, marketing, many other disciplines where technology really relies on very important or very reliable data. So data analysis is one area of technological proficiency that CPOs are training for, highlighted as a skills gap. So that's a key procurement skill. And the final one I highlighted was AI automation and strategy, AI and automation strategy. And I think that if we're looking at technological proficiency and the need to apply technology to solve complex problems, then we really need to start to develop capability in those areas. So in terms of AI, there's a lot of talk about that in the marketplace, and going to events like DPW and reading things online is a real opportunity to develop capability in the area. Because if you've not got a knowledge and a depth of understanding of what can be achieved in AI and automation, you're going to have a hard time building a strategy to really enhance your capability for your procurement function. So changing tack slightly, I was asked also to speak about the future of workforce with a particular focus on the second half of this decade. And I've come up with 5 things that I think leaders should be really thinking about when it comes to the workforce of the second half of this decade. And first and foremost, we need to think about changing demographics and diversity. Workforces are more diverse than ever. We've got boomers working late into their careers in a lot of cases, and we've now got Gen Z forming an increasingly large share of the workforce, and of course everything in between. So leaders need to be aware and capable of dealing with that. And then diversity in all its forms is no longer just a moral imperative. It's now a business necessity to improve and enhance innovation. And so I think leaders need to be thinking long term about how they address issues around diversity in all its forms, not just gender, not just race, but backgrounds in society, educational sort of development, what people have learned at university, things like that, personal qualities. The strongest teams, it's been proven, have got real diversity. And so that's something which leaders need to be thinking very, very carefully about, as indeed they do about mental health and well-being. That's been a focus for quite some time. Of course, it was a real factor in 2020 in the pandemic period, where that was really very, very important for companies to really manage that for their staff. And I think for leaders, it's very important to think about how you're going to put in place the support and resources that long-term give their people the right sort of healthy work-life balance. And last year, there's a lot of talk at conferences, particularly the challenging economic climate, about companies doing more with less. And I heard that from software leaders, I heard that from procurement leaders and consulting leaders as well. Well, I would argue that doing more with less is not necessarily particularly compatible with a healthy work-life balance. So we need to start looking at strategies to deal with that And one of them, of course, is embracing technological advancements, because tech is changing job roles, it's changing skills, it's changing operating models, and leaders need to be informed and ahead of the trends to see the impacts on the operations and their workforce dynamics. And if you're going to really achieve great things with technology, you need to foster a culture of lifelong learning and skills development, because with tech advancing at a pace where I've already read this year where people are saying tech's now outpacing companies and people in a way that perhaps they won't ever catch up. As tech evolves at the pace it does, we need to encourage people to really do their best to keep up, if you will, and you know, this is driven, this need for lifelong learning is driven by the tech advancements, and leaders have got to facilitate ongoing education training to deal with that. And the final point on this slide is that it would be remiss of me with a procurement audience not to mention the importance of sustainability and CSR. And of course, it's integral to business operations, corporate reputations, and also career choices. A lot of people talk about how Gen Z will make their career choices based on sustainability, ESG, CSR issues. But it's not just them. You know, why is that going to be unique to that younger generation? Why can't people of all generations care about the planet, care about social responsibility? So people are making important choices based on that, and that's something which procurement is at the forefront of. So as we assess the future of workforce, those are the key factors that I think leaders need to be aware of. But it's okay talking about that. What are people going to do? What are the action points? And that's where I come to next. So where do you start? How do you actually start to take action on these issues? So I would argue that a good starting point would be to plan your workforce transformation. And that means analysing the impact of technology and planning for the transitions. And as part of that, I think you should start to prioritise diversity and adaptability in your hiring, because there's no short-term fixes available there on diversity. You need a long-term strategy to really bring a diverse range of talent into your organisation. And you also need to start by experimenting and integrating with integrating technology. So, for example, if you've not got something on GenAI already and you're not working on a potential use case, what are you waiting for? It's out there. The leaders in the profession that are doing it, and if you're not, then you're getting left behind, and so are your people. So I would really encourage people to start looking at potential use cases, and also as part of that, encourage a mindset of experimentation and curiosity. And at DPW last year, the example that was very popular was the BT Digital Garage, which is a sort of tech incubator. Now, I would summarize my perception of them as follows. They've got a team there which looks at how technology can be used to solve specific business problems. They set realistic expectations of what can be achieved. They put in place KPIs, understand what the business case would look like and what the return on investment would look like, and trial it without any fear of failure, using all their curiosity and experimentation. And if it fails, then fail fast, learn and move on. But if it's successful, then there's an opportunity to understand how you can then roll out that capability across a wider part of your organization. And that sort of tech incubator, I think, is a model that a lot of people look at and think, that could work for us. And a part of that, you need to drive a culture of innovation and curiosity in order to embrace these opportunities. And that's something which needs to be embedded by the leadership. And it starts with things like team meetings, asking team members to come to a meeting with an idea or an innovation or a what-if scenario. So imagine if in 2018 or 2019, somebody had come to a team meeting and said, what if society gets locked down for several weeks? We can't go in the office. We're all working from home. You would have got looked at very strangely at that point in time. I think a lot of organisations, I don't think too many people actually sort of trialed what they do in that scenario. But that sort of thinking can help companies prepare for risk and change and creates that culture. And it can go a stage further. Why not build it into things like appraisals and performance plans, maybe even pay rises and bonuses, you know, in terms of really incentivizing your people to embrace it. And I've got another example which I'll touch on in a moment in my next slide. But for all this talk of digital skills, technology, culture, We mustn't lose sight of the importance of human-centric skills. Besides digital literacy and tech proficiency, leaders must invest in the softer skills that can't be automated, that actually complement those digital skills. So things like creativity, empathy, critical thinking, communication, and teaching your leaders how to lead in this new world. So they're the sorts of things that I think you should be thinking about your training aside from the digital capability. And there is 4 areas that leaders can really get started to embrace this opportunity for change. And it's a really wonderful opportunity that is ahead of us. So at this point, I shared with my audience, which is predominantly American, this slide about all the vendors that showcased at DPW in Amsterdam in October of last year, 121 in total. And the reason for that is because I think there is no better environment for procurement leaders and their teams to go and learn. Where else could you have 2 to 3 days of such intense learning, speaking to so many different software vendors about what they're doing now, what they're capable of, what the use cases are, what their product roadmaps look like, to really sort of have that possibility to experiment and potentially find some meaningful use cases in your organization. But not only that, to hear from thought leaders from both within and outside the procurement profession, networking with peers who are at the same stage of their journey as you might be, and sharing your stories. So I made the point that the next one is in Amsterdam again in October, but there's also, Matthias Guzman told me last week, also a new event coming to New York in May of next year. And that'll be one which I'm sure a number of American leaders will want to attend. So a great opportunity for learning. And the point I made earlier about, you know, what else can you do with your team? Well, why not, as a CPO, this is what I do if I was a CPO, why not attend yourself and reward some of your best people who've achieved their greatest things in this area with an opportunity to come along and enjoy that learning opportunity themselves and meet and network with peers in that environment, which is a really energized, innovative and wonderful tech conference. So I'd certainly be thinking very careful about bringing my best people onto that so that they could learn alongside the leaders. So as a recruiter, of course, my audience wanted to know what the impact this means for hiring and talent, and I thought it'd be really useful to talk about how leaders can win the battle for talent. I mentioned the Big Four research projects earlier on, and certainly when you read those reports, there's a lot of talk of CPOs facing a real battle for procurement talent. So, you know, what is it that they can do to be successful? So I thought I'd share some tips and some advice from my audience. And really, the first point I wanted to make was something which I've thought about a lot throughout my lengthy career. And it's a phrase I've used many times to customers, and that is that good recruitment starts with retention. If you can't keep your best people, what chance have you got of hiring the best people out in the job market? So if you embrace some of the concepts that I've spoken about, you can create an environment where you're more likely to keep your best people. Because in my experience throughout all my career, the thing that unites the people that generally move jobs, the best people that move jobs, that is that they generally feel that their careers are stalling or are about to stall where they are, and they want to go somewhere where they can see some real growth and development opportunity. So if you create that environment in your workplace where you've got these tech innovations, you've got that creativity, you're embracing curiosity, you're much more likely to keep your best people, and you reduce your churn overall, and you've got a strong story to share when you're interviewing people about your organization. So retain your stars. That's really, really important. All those things I've just spoken about, if you embrace the principles I've spoken about in this presentation, that will give you competitive advantage. That will put you in the upper bracket of the top procurement leaders and top procurement functions, and that'll lead as the access to the best talent, not just in the procurement world, but also from outside of the profession, and potentially in the war for future talent as well, which I'll come to in a moment. Another staple part of my career has been that whenever a customer has briefed me on a role, particularly a role I think is going to be difficult to fill, the question I often ask myself is, where are these people working now? Where are we going to find them? And so if you think about your long-term plans for your hiring and addressing issues like diversity and the number of things we spoke about today already, you need to understand what talent pools you want to penetrate. So that might be other procurement people. It might be people from other disciplines. It might also be from completely out in another area. So, for example, you might want to go and penetrate talent pools for AI and machine learning and such like, data science, of course. So once you've got all these boxes ticked, once you've covered these 3 areas, what do you do with it? Well, you go out and you share your story. As a leader or an aspiring leader, you share your story, and you do that by attending at conferences, ideally speaking, to raise your profile. If not, certainly networking. But it's a great platform to let people know what you're doing, where you're going, and why you're a great place to work. Similarly, online events like webinars, roundtables, etc., social media, all give you the platform to really raise your profile with the target talent pools that I mentioned once you've identified those. And one of them, of course, is your plan for longer term, your longer term workforce planning, is to get out to the university. So if you're in the elite, you can go to MIT, Harvard, Yale. If you're in the States, you can go to Oxford and Cambridge in the UK, the best university in your country. But if you're not quite in that bracket yet, then target your local universities near your head office, near your campus, so that you can have the best of the talent, and not just in procurement or other commercial disciplines, but also those tech disciplines as you plan for a more diverse workforce. So those are the takeaways I gave my audience. I hope you find them useful. I certainly think they're things you can act upon moving forward. And if you've got any questions about them, of course, I'd love to hear from you. Look me up on LinkedIn or get in touch via andrew@edburyDaley.com or my mobiles there. Okay, thank you. Hope you found it useful. I welcome any feedback as always.